Thank you,
You bet.
everybody, for joining us today for our industry update. As always, please mute your lines and use the chat feature only and sending it to everyone so that Melissa and John can both see the questions at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John to kick this off.
Thanks very much, Hope. And thank you, Melissa, for all of the good work you're putting in. And thanks to all of you for tuning in today. There's quite a bit of news today, both on the federal level and at the state level, that for the most part, Melissa is going to cover, as she always does. Let me remind you that the webinar today is designed for the benefit of our hotel and restaurants around the state, as well as our travel and tourism partners and any of our allied members that want to join in. This is an off-the-record call webinar. It's not designed for the press. We've done hundreds of press calls and interviews, and happy to continue to do those. But this forum is not one of those. So if you're with the press, kindly disconnect. And with that, I'll again welcome you all. Thank you for being here, and turn it over to Melissa.
Bad start. I have to unmute myself before I start talking. Welcome back to another week of updates. Lots of federal stuff. So as usual, we're going to start with that so we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Eric. I'm going to preface everything that I'm going to say now with a disclaimer that everything is very fluid for the federal package. And to put this in perspective, weeks ago, the U.S. House passed the HEROES Act. And it was a $3 trillion package. It sat in the Senate. This week, the package that was released on Monday that we're going to be discussing today was released. So I'm going to tell you what we know. And some of the items you might not be thrilled about, some you may, but please know that they are just in negotiations now. So everything that I'm going to tell you today is very fluid. Everything will change. I think we're going to have a lot better feel of where we're going and what's going to be included in this package once we hit the end of this week. But for right now, things are fluid. So if you're one of those people that is sending me emails and asking why one specific provision is not included, or calling me and asking me why another specific provision is not included, just give us until the end of the week to try and wrangle all of the information that you're looking for and that you need. I'm going to start with the P3. I think that's the biggest portion of the new package. And like I said, I have the National Restaurant Association, American Hotel and Lodging Association, U.S. Travel up there. A lot of their priorities, as I discussed last week, do cross over between one another. So I'm going to kind of go over everything. And then if there's any specifics, we can drill down from there. First thing, I always like to bring some light to those who have not been able to utilize the P3, but I think they already know. I'm assuming they discussed it on their call earlier. The P3 will be expanded to destination marketing organizations. So that is in this version of the bill as it is right now. So you will be eligible to apply for a P3, that P3 that you were never able to apply for before. There is going to be a second drawdown on the P3, but it is not going to be as broad or as all-encompassing as the first drawdown. So larger businesses are not going to be eligible. Generally speaking, they're going to throw another $190 billion into the P3, and it's going to be employers that meet the SBA revenue size standards or have no more than 300 employees. So 300 employees is your cap for this drawdown of the P3. The exception for my franchisees still applies for you. For my restaurant and hotel franchisees, there is that exception, recognizing how devastated the industry has been. That continues, but if you have more than that 300 employee threshold, you would not be able to apply. They are setting some money aside. So they're putting $25 billion aside for entities with 10 or fewer employees. $10 billion is set aside for loans made by community lenders. So those are those small banks that kind of got pushed to the side due to the large banks giving ginormous loans to large corporations. And again, the loan amounts are going to be the average total, that 2.5 times, but they're going to be capped at $2 million in this round. Also, that 60-40, all of the rules that applied to the P3 before still apply, with a few different exceptions. There will be some expansion of the forgivable expenses from before to include supplier costs, covered worker protection expenditures, all that PPE and investments you've made there, and covered operations expenditures. Part of the P3, though, is a requirement that you need to prove that you've lost 50% of your reduction in gross revenue. So you have to prove to get this version of the P3 that you've lost 50% of your revenue. For my restaurants and hotels, it's probably very easy. For some of our franchisees that might have drive-throughs, probably would be a little bit more difficult. But keep in mind, this is all extremely fluid, but the P3 is going to be that primary free money that you get to continue to help you with operations. And all of those details are continuing to be flushed out. A few other things for my hotels. There is a provision in there for those CMBS loans that directs Treasury to give you relief in terms of those funds that you can't get relief from now. Some other key parts of the COVID package as we see it right now includes a number of our priorities. And I will talk about unemployment benefits, so don't jump ahead of me here. Expanded employee retention tax credit, the ERTC, an expansion in that is included in this bill. That tax credit for a safe and healthy workplace. So it's a 50% tax credit for all of the investments that you have been making in your business. That's included in this version of the bill. For if business meals ever happen again, which we certainly hope they will, the tax deduction for business meals is going to be increased from 50% to 100%. So that's a key part of it. There will be loans included, recovery loans. They're not grants, so they're not the P3. They won't be forgivable, but they will be providing $100 billion in long-term, low-cost loans, again, to those who can demonstrate that they've lost 50% in their revenue due to COVID-19. So as you can see, a lot of the provisions of this bill, it's very different than previous versions of it. And that's because they're really targeting the industries and the businesses that have been severely impacted, which unfortunately is all of us. Another key part of this package, liability protection. It's going to provide a threshold and protect all of you in terms of liability protection. We might need to do a little bit more due diligence on the state level, but it is going to provide that level of protection that is basically kind of the terror in the back of all of our minds right now in terms of this. So liability protection is included in all of this. Some things before I jump to unemployment to keep in mind. The Democratic version, the House version of their bill provided a significant amount of state and local aid, similar to the previous CARES Act. The Senate version of the bill does not provide any additional aid to states or cities at this point. Instead, they're going to be authorizing states and cities to use the CARES Act money they got before however they want. So currently that money that the state and the cities and your counties received, there's specific provisions they have to use it for. It has to be directly related to COVID. It has to be related to the relief of COVID. They're going to basically say use it however you want. And that is a concern for us because we do have that CARES Act money that we're targeting in terms of grant programs for our industry, grant programs for our destination marketing organizations. And if states are authorized to use it however they wish, I think we're going to have some legislators that are going to be more interested in balancing the budget than they are in terms of providing us the grant programs that we need. Again, all of this is fluid and still being discussed. There is the stimulus checks are going to go out again, pretty much under the same parameters that they were before. So those are that $1,200 checks for anyone making under $75,000. That seems to be the only thing that the House and Senate have agreed upon. And unemployment benefits, we're seeing some fluidity on that front. The House version that was passed previously in the HEROES Act was extended the $600, I think, until the end of this year. The Senate said no way, and articulated some of the comments we've made, which is how do we get employees back when they're making more on unemployment than they were when they were working for us. So the Senate came out with kind of a $100 to $200 in lieu of the $600. So the $600 would be reduced to $100 to $200 to go to people who are collecting unemployment. That's where we were yesterday. Today, there is some talk of extending the $600 very short term, maybe for another month, another 2 months, and then the $100 to $200 will kick in. So there will be some type of supplement as there was before for your employees that are collecting unemployment. And the $600 might continue a little while longer. After that, we're looking at $100 to $200 in supplements for employees, which of course we hope will encourage them to come back to work. And hopefully by that time we will be able to welcome them back to work, because we will be back to somewhat normal operations. That is the general gist, like I said, of where we are right now in terms of this package. They are negotiating. The initial hope was that they would have something done by the end of this week. I think Mitch McConnell laughed last week when he was asked if they would hit that deadline. I think right now our hard stop continues to be next Friday, August 7th. So this is a relief package that is going similar to before. We hope to pull it together, get it across the finish line by the end of next week, and some of those funds will start getting drawn out again to all of you, because we all know you need them. So that's our timeline. You haven't been getting a lot of grassroots messages from the national organizations, and that's because they're still negotiating. So we need to kind of see where we land, what's included and what's not included, and then go from there in terms of what type of advocacy we need to move forward with. But all signs are pointing to where we need them to, but I think some of those numbers are going to have to be moved in terms of employee numbers, maybe revenue numbers, things like that, to ensure that our industry specifically is getting the federal assistance that we need. With that, I think we can go to the next slide. I think we've had a lot of ode to Johns and Mick's on here from our hearing yesterday. So yesterday, the House Republican Policy Committee was the first committee within the legislature, and this includes all of the House Republicans, had a hearing on restaurants specifically, and specifically the mitigation, as the governor calls it, efforts and targets against our industry. I don't think we could have asked the hearing to go any better. It was House Republicans, so it was a friendly field, but I think we really drove home the fact that they need to be screaming louder, and our friends on the other side of the aisle need to be helping more, and pressure needs to be put on the governor in terms of some of the decisions that he's been making. So PRLA was up first. We had a ton of great testifiers. John testified, Mick Owens, who was our chair of our Alcohol Service Committee, testified, and Ray, who is one of our members down in the Montgomery Bucks County area, who's leading that Montco Bucks Restaurant Alliance, testified. And I think we really drove home just how terrible these efforts are. And we had lots of media coverage. And really our goal with all of this is to put pressure on the governor and to make him realize that he is devastating our industry. And I think we really were able to drive that point home yesterday. John, did you want to add anything? I saw you appeared on the screen, so I didn't know if you wanted to jump in with any feedback from the hearing yesterday.
Well, thank you for getting it set up, Melissa. And the real value of these is not necessarily what is said in the hearing, but what is covered in the press afterwards. And there is a huge amount of press because of this. Somebody commented on here on the chat field about the importance of the press in it. Press has been 100% on the side of the restaurant industry in this subject. And yesterday was, there was many state articles, scores of state articles about this, television interviews, and a fair amount of national coverage too. And I think that does make a difference, particularly when 50% versus 25% has no bearing on safety. Face masking and social distancing is about safety, and we're all about that. So thanks, Melissa, for getting this organized, helping to line up a great repertoire of speakers. And really appreciate the House Republican Committee, Policy Committee holding this too. It was very helpful, I think. Thanks, Melissa.
Of course. And on top of that, we have been seeing a lot more vocal interaction in terms of the Democrats, which was really, as you've all heard me say, has been our focus. So last week, the Senate Democrats put out, Senator Brewster and Senator Iovino, with the support of the Democratic caucus, put out a restaurant recovery plan. I joked it's actually a very brilliant plan because they essentially copied and pasted PRLA's priorities. So I think it's especially brilliant. And yesterday, the House did the same exact thing, the House Democrats, with a few extra items, but generally took our list of priorities and created it into their own set of recovery priorities. So one, they are recognizing the impact this has had, but two, even beyond that, a letter came out that was included in the daily update yesterday, so I know you all read it, from the Northwest Democrats, and it was to the governor, and they said restaurants need to go to 50%. They are not the problem. You cannot prove they are the problem, and you need to increase enforcement and stop targeting our restaurants. So the fact that his own party is now coming out, and that this is what we needed, this is what we've talked about the past 2 weeks, is that I can get every Republican in the House and Senate to scream, you know, to the end of time. But we're really starting to drive that conversation where the Democrats are realizing that maybe the governor went a step too far. And I think maybe the governor is starting to feel that pressure. I'm not sure if Secretary Levine is feeling the pressure right now, but we really are continuing to push the needle there. So as you're interacting with your legislators, please continue to do so. It's going to be key in terms of getting this reversed sooner than later. Also, in terms of next steps, as I said, we do have our recovery proposal out there. We are working in terms of getting all of those pieces of legislation filed. So we should have them filed over the next few weeks, and we will, as I mentioned before, be doing that grassroots push to get many of them across the finish line. We've gotten really great feedback on our priorities because we were targeted. I could ask for the sun and the moon and the stars, which I sometimes like to do, but we really targeted this as what the industry needs to get through this crisis. And I think the legislature recognizes and appreciates that. When you have a priority package that I have Democrats supporting, I mean, heck, the Democrats support going to a 15% licensee discount. When did we think that would happen? So I think we're seeing that bipartisanship, and I think that's really going to help us. So please stay tuned. Once we feel that we are in a place to start pushing on all of these items and getting them moving, we will be asking you to engage, and that's going to be really important. PLCB advisory number 27. If you remember, we had advisory notice number 26, and it kept on getting so weighed down with all of these updates, they just created a new advisory notice, and that came out yesterday. It was supposed to come out 2 weeks ago, but who's counting except me? They made some announcements that are good, necessary. I don't know if they go as far as we need them to, which is why we do have legislation in our recovery package to kind of get us the rest of the way of where we need to be in terms of our priorities. A few things that are in there. If you are up for renewal, they are not requiring you to renew your license up until October 1st. So any license renewals from when COVID started to September 30th of 2020, you are not required to renew your license at this time. I understand that while that is known, and they have stated that, some of you are still probably getting messages from the LCB saying your license is up for renewal. Their systems, I don't think, speak. And I've said this before, they make a decision in one thing and then they don't change the computer system to actually reiterate that, and then you're all confused because you're getting told that you need to renew your license. But in this advisory notice, they have said they will not require anyone to renew their licenses up until September 30th. Second, applicable to all of you, I know you all know the liquor code in and out just like me. So since you do know that, if your license is not in use for more than 15 days, you have to put it in safekeeping. That provision is laid to the side. So you do not need to do that. If you've decided that 25% is shenanigans and no one can operate that way, shocking, and decide that you just need to shut down for right now, you do not have to put your license in safekeeping. So that is part of the announcement. License is already in safekeeping. This one's a freaking headache, is how I will describe it, because it's not what we were hoping it would be in terms of their announcement. So if your license is in safekeeping, they're essentially giving you a pass for the months that COVID is happening. So as you all know, if you have a license in safekeeping, after 2 years, the safekeeping fees double. So if you're paying $10,000, you're now paying $20,000, $40,000, depending on the county you're in. It's expensive. The whole point is to force you to get your license out of safekeeping. And obviously right now is a terrible time to pull your license out of safekeeping and open a restaurant. So this announcement that they made essentially said, if the state of emergency lasts for 10 months, you don't have to pay your safekeeping fees now. It'll get delayed the 10 months that we're in a state of emergency. We believe that all safekeeping fees should be eliminated for an entire year, similar to your license fees. So this is a start, it's a step. We were hoping for a 1-year pass in terms of safekeeping fees. Instead, it's a bit of kicking the can, I think. So we're going to continue to talk to the LCB, but this is also one of our legislative priorities as well. Also, late fees. As I said, you do not have to renew your license, but sometimes the computers don't speak, and you might be getting messages saying you have to renew your license, and you'll be assessed late fees if you don't renew your license. They are waiving all late fees again until September 30th of 2020. Yes, I am aware that that is only 8 weeks of this, but the LCB has said that they are going to be reviewing this and potentially extending this advisory based on where we are in terms of COVID right now. But this is the announcement that came out just yesterday. So if you have not renewed, do not renew, save that money, use it for whatever you need it to right now. And as always, if you have any problems with LCB or licensing or anything, let me know. I will say sometimes I bash the LCB, and I do it with affection, but they have really been doing their best to try and step up and do what we need them to do in terms of helping you guys and getting things processed. The extension, if you're extending your license, those are still flying through. It's an auto approval. If you're looking to get a wine expansion permit, also flying through. That is still $2,000. You're not going to get a pass on that fee. But please, if you're having any issues, don't hesitate to reach out. They will do whatever they can to help. And like I said, we are going to be moving through the legislative process, more things to provide you some of that relief based on what you're going through right now. Okay, I think we can go to everybody's favorite topic, reopening / mitigation, because I can't call it reopening anymore because we backslid. Generally for Pennsylvania, numbers aren't great. Across the entire country, I think we're kicking butt. But the numbers are averaging over 1,000, which they hadn't for weeks. So we are seeing an increase in cases. I think that there's probably going to be some attention that we'll be drawing to numbers still increasing even after they shut restaurants down, because then maybe, golly gee, restaurants were never the problem. So we will be working on drawing attention to that. Right now, we are still at the 25%. Secretary Levine, in her press conference yesterday, essentially said that is not going to change anytime soon. That is why I think the pressure is really important, because I think the pressure is what's going to cause a change sooner than later. So we need to keep up that pressure. Again, we are not the problem. We're seeing that we're not the problem, and they need to increase enforcement and all of that. Generally, I voiced an FYI last week, since I know you all remember everything I tell you. Buffets. We had some Department of Ag inspectors who took the bar definition very literally in terms of no bar service, and they were applying it to salad bars and some buffet stations. We have clarified that the new mitigation efforts do not apply to buffets or anything like that, but they do need to take their food and sit back down. The butts and seat provision still applies, but buffets can still continue. So we were able to clarify that from the governor's office. And then again, like I said, we're not going to see an announcement this week that we're going back to 50%, which is why we all need to keep on banging the drum and putting pressure, get more of that legislative Democrat letters out there to the governor, putting pressure on him. Let's talk a little about LCB guidance, because that one was just a joy when that one came out. Let me just pull it up, because I don't like to speak out of turn. So last week we finally got guidance from the LCB as it pertains to the new mitigation efforts. And it was pretty straightforward in terms of agreeing and following through with what we knew. And then they had the really awesome line in there that says, additional drinks may be purchased while the customer or a member of the customer's group is consuming their meal, but no further drinks may be purchased after the meal is finished. Heads exploded, because the way it reads gives you the impression that once you clear somebody's plate away, they can no longer have another drink if they want one. I was told that maybe we're reading it too literally, and I said maybe you wrote it too poorly. But the guidance hasn't changed, but I can tell you this. The Secretary of Health's guidance is similar to how we are interpreting it and how the LCE is going to be interpreting it from what I'm hearing. They don't want, after they're done their burger or their chicken fingers, for people to sit around and have 5 more beers or 5 more glasses of wine, like I sometimes like to do. What they want is, if you finish your meal and you're like, wow, I want another glass of wine, that's going to be fine. When you close out your check, you're done. So if you close out your check and you decide, oh gosh, I really did want to get that espresso martini, something I also sometimes do, you would have to get another meal on that new tab. So that's how that reads. I know it doesn't read pretty, it doesn't read clear. We have asked the LCB to update it. They have not yet. But in terms of enforcement, you do not need to leave a dirty plate or a basket of bread on the table to check the box in terms of the finishing of the meal. That's that. But like I said, if LCE comes in and they see 6 empty beer glasses on a table with 3 people, and no food, that's going to be an issue on that front. Generally, the LCB guidance doesn't really change from anything we got from the Department of Health, so I'll answer specific questions on that front, and happy to go into any further details, but I don't want to spend too much time on that today. Allegheny County, they have their press conference today. The numbers are getting a little bit better in Allegheny County. As you know, they did align to a certain extent with the state guidance, except for the fact that all service has to end at 11 p.m. That is not a statewide provision, that's an Allegheny County provision, and their outdoor events are limited to 50 people, while the rest of the state, except Philadelphia, because now Allegheny County and Philadelphia are both very special, are subject to 250. So nothing has changed on the Allegheny County front. Your 3-drink limit has been eliminated, but the meal requirement is now in its place, and that's the statewide guidance. I do not know of any changes, and I would be surprised if we see a change on the Allegheny front in terms of that 11 p.m. 50-person rule, at least right now, with numbers increasing. Philadelphia. Philadelphia is not like, we're going to give it another 2 weeks or another week and see what happens. They're like, we're just going to jam this down your throat for another month. So Philadelphia announced yesterday the indoor dining ban is extended to September 1st. So it was supposed to end August 1. We realized last week, and we're not surprised last week when we heard that it probably was not going to be, indoor dining was not going to be allowed on August 1. I think we were a little surprised that they're pushing it back a full month, but everyone's going down the shore and apparently having house parties and bringing COVID back to Philadelphia, and this is how they're reacting to it. So that's the update on the Philadelphia front. We did have a webinar this week. I think you all were part of last Monday when I did my mitigation webinar, and I had so many questions from Philadelphia. We decided to do a Philadelphia specific webinar, and Philadelphia really stepped up and had numerous departments on that webinar. Few things that we learned for my Philadelphia friends. If you were not on the webinar, I know you all were, but just in case, Philadelphia is being a little different in terms of outdoor dining in and of itself. Typically, the 50-person limit in Philadelphia, we had assumed applied to private events. And for outdoor dining, as long as social distancing was used, the 50-person limit wouldn't apply. It would just be based on social distancing. Philadelphia has since reiterated that 50 people, including staff, is the cap for even outdoor dining. So if you have tables out, if you've extended your sidewalk cafe or you're extending into the street because of a street closure or you're doing a streetery, 50 plus your service staff is going to be your ultimate cap in Philadelphia. That I don't know how long that's going to last for, but that's what they're rolling with. If you have an awesome setup and you can seat more than 50 people and you want to pursue that and get an exemption on that front, you can reach out to the Philadelphia Department of Health and they will review that proposal. But it has to be sit-down dining. Beer gardens are a problem in Philadelphia. That's really where I think the 50-person cap kind of came into play because of some issues with some beer gardens in the city. So 50 is your cap for outdoor in Philadelphia, all in. Again, if you would like to get an exemption or have them review this really awesome plan you have that might allow you to seat more than 50 people, they are happy to do so. Another thing in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is a little bit like the state in terms of they put out guidance and then they're like, this is our guidance. And then you ask them to explain it and they go, we will address specific questions. But generally, we have had some questions from some of our hotels, especially in Philadelphia, because the guidance does allow for indoor events, no more than 25 people. That is not an exemption to the food and beverage ban. So while you could have a group of less than 25 people, including staff, potentially within your hotel, I'm trying to get more clarification on all of this, there can be no food and beverage service whatsoever. So in Philadelphia, the indoor food and beverage is universally applied across hotels, restaurants, anything. So that's the clarification we got on that front. Again, we're trying to see if we can get some wiggle room in terms of private events. Could they do takeout food or something like that? So we're looking into that. But generally, there is no service of food and beverage for private events. I'm assuming that this is somewhere already in this long chat. You guys are very chatty today. Of our petition, we are up to, I think as of last night, I forgot to check today, we're about 14,000 on the petition. So we need you to keep on circulating that. We need more names. I need thousands of people per legislative district if I can get it to move the needle on this. So please get that petition out there. It is helping. Those numbers and the fact that it's on social media, the fact that you're sharing it in your newsletters, the fact that you're sharing it on your social pages, legislators are watching, and some legislators are actually sharing it on their social medias as well. I just had another legislator who's going to do it today out in the West because I want some more traction out West. Southeast is doing pretty kick butt right now. So please get that petition out there, share it with the world. We are planning to initially run it for 2 weeks, which would bring us to this Friday. We'll probably extend it a little bit. I really do want to hit 100,000 if we can. I think that's a big number that draws attention to the frustration, and it's bipartisan frustration that we're seeing across the Commonwealth in terms of restaurants and customers. Public events, I just wanted to touch upon this briefly because we've had a few of them. I mentioned before, we are seeing a lot of our restaurants, and thank you for doing this, and it's so organic that it's awesome. You guys are frustrated and you want to draw attention to this, and to be honest, the media is really responding positively to the frustration that you all are expressing. So in Montgomery and Bucks County, there was a restaurant response alliance that was formed for restaurants down there. They had their first meeting about 2 weeks ago, and then they're having another meeting tomorrow in terms of drawing attention to some of the issues in Bucks and Montgomery County. We have an awesome group out in Harrisburg that was organized by Matt Flinchball and with a ton of restaurants and people out in Harrisburg as well. They are outdoor events. Everybody's wearing their masks, and PRLA has really encouraged that. If we're going to do it, we're going to do a rally or anything like that, we have to do it right. But all of us congregating somewhere without masks just makes us look like we don't care about the rules that we're telling everybody that we're following anyway. So if you are in an area, I know Allegheny County had a meeting a little bit different last week in terms of the others, but if you are interested in participating in these groups or starting one of these groups in your area, let us know. PRLA is not trying to facilitate any of these. We're happy to go. John and I and Ben and I have been attending and speaking at some of these events, but really it's just you guys coming together and expressing your frustration. And that, like I said, legislators are showing up, media is showing up, and the fact that PRLA is there to assist and kind of give actions to everybody there to tell them what they can do, but you guys are kind of doing it on your own, is really drawing attention to it. So if you're in an area that has not had one of these events and want to organize one, let us know how we can help. We're happy to do so. I think with that, we're going to do our friendly order enforcement. These are all the links that we've provided before. I will say slowly, BLCE is actually enforcing, and they are starting to cite restaurants. And it's kind of funny because I think one restaurant was cited and they went to their legislator and the legislator said, this isn't fair. And I was like, well, we're not, if somebody's at the point where they're getting cited, they're breaking all the rules. So LCE is starting to cite in terms of egregious violations. They are not citing you for the fact that somebody got a hot dog and that's not enough of a meal in their opinion. They're going to cite you if you're serving people at the bar. They're going to cite you if you're not wearing masks, your guests aren't wearing masks, you're not social distancing. Those are really the basic provisions that they're looking to enforce. The order, as you know, the mitigation order is such a headache and a nightmare, it's hard for anybody to really enforce it. So you need to be following those basic parameters. And if you're not, I can't even defend you. And Philadelphia is also shutting down restaurants. They have been out more often, and we're starting to see some of the shutdowns in terms of restaurants that are not compliant in Philadelphia. And Allegheny County, as you know, they've created a new task force, whatever you call it, that's kind of a pre-inspection check to determine if anyone's non-compliant. And then the Department of Health goes in to re-inspect if there is a restaurant that's non-compliant. So continue. 25% is shenanigans. I get it. I agree. Not having bar service, also shenanigans. I get it. And I agree. But if people are throwing caution to the wind and saying, I'm done, I don't care anymore, you need to turn them in. And if you don't want to be the person to do it, send me their information and I'll do it for you. You all know I don't care. So please continue. If there's somebody breaking the rules and taking advantage of a situation that you're not, you know, you guys are suffering right now. So don't let anybody take advantage of this so they can benefit off of an order because they're just ignoring it. I think with that, I can turn it over to training solutions for John or Hope while I sip some coffee and prepare to go through the questions.
Thank you, Melissa. Nice job, as always. Before I get into this, I did want to point out, and this will be in our daily update at the end of the day today, but if you're in the hotel business, you may have received a message today from Chip Rogers, CEO of the American Hotel and Lodging Association, because today for the American Hotel and Lodging Association and the hotel industry is Save Our Jobs Action Day. And it has links so that you can send letters to your congressman or senator. This is really important. It's a really important grassroots effort. So look for that today in your email inbox. And if you didn't receive it, please look at the update at the end of the day today, and we'll have a link to it then. It's AHLA Save Our Jobs Action Day today. Also want to mention that in the hearing yesterday, we're able to roll out a couple of new data points, which I think will be helpful. One is that a survey that was just completed last week by Yelp, where we're asked all the time how many restaurants are going to close permanently because of this shutdown. And it's a number that no one has been able to get their arms around thus far. Yelp did a survey that determined that 60% on a nationwide basis of restaurants that close temporarily will close permanently based on what's happened thus far. So we were able to extrapolate that based on Pennsylvania numbers that at the 25% level, it's likely that 50% of the restaurants will close temporarily based on what they did during the beginning of the shutdown. And that would equate to 7,500 restaurants closing permanently. This is not because I want to be a downer, but it's because this is the kind of news that the press catches, and it represents 200,000 of jobs roughly that we'd lose forever. And that's what's important to get the attention of the lawmakers, particularly in this case, the governor, frankly, when there is no evidence that can be produced that shows that 50% or 25% is any safer than 50%. There is no evidence. It's been requested many times by the press and by us. There is nothing that substantiates 25%. And the other data point was from, we've been making the point that the administration is targeting the restaurant industry, not just our language, it was Governor Wolf's language when he rolled out these mitigation efforts. And the reality of it is that there's another finance company called Wallet Hub that did a survey of all 50 states and determined with several data points which states were the most restrictive. In restaurants, Pennsylvania is the third most restrictive in the country. Only California and New Jersey, with the new 25% mitigation, only California and New Jersey exceed that. On the other hand, in the other 7 data points that were reported in patch.com, the average of those is right around the middle of the country. In other words, we're about 27th of all the mitigation efforts, and yet in the case of restaurants, we're the 3rd most stringent in the country. I think this is further evidence that we're targeting the restaurant industry, and that the restaurant industry is being targeted. We have to keep pointing this out. Restaurant industry is not the problem nor the solution to this. It's face masking, social distancing, following the rules for everyone. So the training solutions that are up here are AHLA Safe Stay. There's going to be more focus on hotels as we move forward. There's been a lot of focus on restaurants because there are a lot more restaurants and they're a lot more obvious. But hotels are going to be really important that they follow the Safe Stay protocol that AHLA has put together. For one reason, because guests, and the numbers are showing this, guests are gravitating towards vacation rentals because they think they're safer just because they're not around people. So if you can if the hotels adopt AHLA Safe Stay, they'll have another certification that they can hang on their door. It will help guests say, we're doing things right, we're keeping you safe. Serve Safe Dining commitment is similar for restaurants, and that's available through the National Restaurant Association. If you're a member of the PRLA and you have a restaurant, you're also a member of the National Restaurant Association. And Serve Safe Manager certification is this is something that's always been required in the state of Pennsylvania, continues to be required. We're still offering those classes, currently in-person classes across the state, so watch for that. That's it on the training solutions, upcoming webinars. We've had some really, really helpful webinars. If you've had a chance to tune into them, please take a look at the webinar schedule and get signed up. We always have great turnout for this webinar each week, but there's other good ones as well. And here it is. Let me also, several people have put up the petition link today on the chat. This petition is really important. You should have it on all your email signatures. You should be sending it to all your customers. It's not just for restaurateurs to fill it out. Melissa talked about it earlier. It's for all people because everyone loves restaurants. Everyone wants restaurants to survive and wants the great people that work in our industry to continue to have jobs. So with that, Melissa, I'll turn it back to you for the questions.
John, can I add in one thing to the webinar piece? I saw the question came up about de-escalation webinars again. I am working on this. I have found free resources out with a company called Right Response. We will be sending information out about that. It's a free ebook to help you guide your staff through de-escalation steps. It's also an online presentation that you can watch, but we are trying to get a live webinar that does not cost money. So I am working through that because I know I did see some questions on that. And regarding Serve Safe Manager certification, I mean, on the Philadelphia call, they did state they are out doing inspections. So it is important to keep that up to date and make sure that your staff is up to date because they will be looking to make sure that their certifications are not expired. We do have our class schedule up on our website under the calendar of events, and you can register straight off of the website. And with that, I will turn it over to Melissa.
I am off my game today. All right. What is the period of measurement for the 50% loss in revenue? Currently, and I'm saying currently because we don't like it, and I know the NRA and AHLA is trying to get it changed. They're basing it off of actual quarters. So they're saying that you can pick January, February, March of 2020 and compare it to January, February, March of 2019, or April, May, June, and compare it back to 2019. So they're saying you have to use those specific delineated quarters currently. The hope is that you will just be able to pick the period that you want to use, obviously picking the period that you've been most impacted to prove your 50% loss, because obviously January, February, March, only March is really showing that really hard revenue hit. So again, that is as it's written right now, as NRA has told me, because I have not read the bill and I probably will not. Oh, and also it's kind of funny because you all are saying Mick did a great job, and he's calling me right now. And if he was on the webinar, he would actually know that you all said he did a great job in his testimony yesterday. So we can all give him a hard time about that. Let's get to another question. So yeah, we are trying to, the 50%, they are trying to change that. So it's not a strict quarter. Melissa, serious question. Okay. In theory, I can cram 25 people in my small living room and have 25 people in a 15,000 square foot ballroom, and both are okay as long as everyone is masking. Why can't the government use a formula of square footage for private indoor events to make a determination of how many bodies you can have in a room? That is a great question, and one that the governor has not deigned to answer. I don't know the 25 number. Even when it was 250, it was still kind of silly because especially for giant convention spaces, you knew you could provide social distancing. I think the problem is, and we're seeing this in terms of masks as well, they can enforce all of us because we have licenses that are dependent on the state. They can't enforce you or I having 25 people crammed in our living room. That's more difficult to enforce. That's your local police department operating off of a complaint. There are so many things that could be logical about this, and this is one of the many things that are not logical. And that's unfortunately something that we hope to change. As John has mentioned before all of this backpedaling started, we were trying to figure out how to change those numbers to be more respective and inclusive of large spaces that can accommodate more people. And obviously that came to a hard stop when we all got rolled back to 25. So if you can get to the governor and get an answer on that, I would love to know that one as well. Does your first P3 loan need to be cleared and sent in for forgiveness before you can apply and receive a second grant? That is not in my cheat sheet document, so I would presume that you do not, especially because we don't know how long it's going to take for the forgiveness to come in, and also because for your first P3, you technically have until the end of the year to apply for forgiveness. So my assumption is that it will not need to be cleared and forgiven, but that is all going to be included in whatever the final package is. So I would assume you don't need to, but we won't know in terms of that. This is fresh off the press. Not sure if Melissa knows. I think this is the notice I already talked about, Adam. I did talk about LCB notice number 27. So we did go over all the details of that. It was in our daily update yesterday as well. So if you did not see it, there is a link in our daily update. All the restaurant bar owners, John from PRLA, and the Legion and VFW's messaging was point on. Hopefully all the press will help move the needle from 25%. Let us know what else we can do to help spread the word besides having the public sign the petition, stand with restaurants. In terms of what else you can do, we need to reach out. Republican legislators, yes, but it's going to be our Democratic elected officials that have the ear of the governor. So that's really, you need to be calling their offices, you need to be emailing them. I'm putting together a list for my Montgomery and Bucks County. I'm halfway through it. You have a lot of legislators, but I'm putting together a list of literally all of the contact information for those elected officials. So happy to do that as well for any of you that might want it, so you can kind of share the contact information with the world. I love when legislators get mad at me and they're like, why are all your people calling me? And I'm like, do a better job, and they won't. So definitely let me know if you need that contact information. Is there any discussion about the period of time you would need to deploy the new P3 money, 6 months or longer? Again, not in my cheat sheet. So I think that's all going to have to be part of, and my cheat sheet is like a page long. So we'd have to see how that rolls out. I think obviously they're allowing some of that money to be set aside for certain businesses. So we should get that once again, I will say this. This is not the final package. This package that was released is inherently different than the package the House Democrats released. So please don't take everything I'm telling you today to the bank that this is the rules and regulations, because it's not. And when we have them, we will give you all of that information. I think I answered this question. Do we have any idea what the period of comparison is to determine a 50% revenue drop? Will it compare last year or the booked revenue we were expecting to receive? All I know is, if it's lost, if you booked it and you lost it, I would consider that to be lost revenue. But again, it's going to be based, right now it's based on quarters, but all of this, if they're calling it the P3 second draw, is going to be figured out over the coming few days. I think they like to work on the weekend. God bless them. Or maybe it's just the staff that's stuck working on the weekend. But I think by the end of this week, beginning of next week, we're going to have a better feel of what a final package looks like. And we will, of course, cover it in next week's webinar. Reiterating a thought, I think Hope did cover this. Is there any movement on PRLA's part to develop training for frontline staff to deal with COVID-19 related confrontations? Yes, as Hope said, she found some resources, but we do recognize the need for a webinar. So we are going to continue. Apparently, nobody wants to touch this issue because we're having a heck of a time finding someone to do a webinar for us. But we recognize that resources are great, but we do want to do a webinar on this for you. Shout out to Ben, who probably lost 10 pounds in perspiration yesterday with Bob, but Bob Raffetto, shout out to Ben, who walked door to door visiting restaurants in downtown Westchester yesterday. In 4 hours, they visited about 60 venues. They gave a courtesy check of signage, social distancing, and masks. It was a great help to restore Chester County, much appreciated too. So thank you, Ben and Bob, for taking the time to do that. I've not seen any talk of the business interruption insurance, reinsurance in the GOP proposal. Is it in? I don't see it either. But it is in the Democrat proposal. So hopefully it will be included. I'm trying to see if I missed it somewhere. I don't think I did.
I looked through it also. I looked through it also this morning for the same reason. I got that question last night. I couldn't find it either, Melissa.
So, no, but I do know that it's a priority, and hopefully, I think I know we want the P3s, but there's also the Restaurant Revitalization Act that has that $120 billion assistance to restaurants, and that's inclusive of that. So I think that we are going to continue to see a lot of pressure for that. We're seeing, obviously, in this package that they're definitely trying to target businesses that are more impacted than others, but there does need to be specific provisions for the restaurant industry. With that being said, you have every other industry saying that they need specific provisions to help them. And in the end, you kind of see elected officials say, nope, we're just going to create one pot of money and whoever gets it, gets it. And I think that might be what we're seeing here. But I will never say that my colleagues at the National Restaurant Association and the Government Affairs Department are not doing an awesome job all the time. So I would not give up on more relief packages for our industry yet. What is going on with the lawsuits that businesses are filing against their insurance companies for income replacement insurance stemming from the DeVito versus Governor Wolf case? Are businesses starting to refile with their insurance companies for this benefit? Who is supporting this effort? I think that the DeVito versus Governor Wolf is different than the business interruption insurance cases. The DeVito versus Governor Wolf had to do specifically with business shutdowns and how that was against the Constitution, not business interruption insurance. But there are a number of lawsuits out there right now relating to business interruption insurance. There's one, I think, against Erie Insurance that a judge did say that they have standing to pursue. So we're seeing that, but there has been, I'm going to be honest with you, and this is why I'm not a lawyer, because I might be the most impatient person you'll ever meet. This is not going to be a quick solution. So they're going to move forward. I would say even if they win at the lower court level, there's going to be appeals as it pertains to this insurance piece. So you can continue to file if you haven't filed yet, but there isn't going to be an answer on that. And the DeVito versus Governor Wolf case is separate from the actual business interruption insurance. We're still waiting for some type of positive ruling on that piece. But if many of you probably have filed and your insurance company said, sorry for you, good luck. But if something changes on that front and there is some type of ruling, you'll be able to file if you haven't filed already. But again, gosh, my Pittsburgh paid sick leave one, that took me 4 years. So this is not going to be a 1 month, 2 month, even though they're trying to fast track it process. Ben put up the restaurant promise. If we already charged a late fee for liquor license renewal, how do we get a credit refund? Reach out to licensing and request a refund. They will give you a refund, Michelle. And if you need any help with that, let me know. We can run it up the flagpole. But they are issuing, I'm like, I know nothing about technology, but I feel like I could make their computer system better. but they are giving refunds in terms of anything being assessed on that front. If our license renewed in March and was paid for in January, for any type of rebate or extension of our license to be put in place. So that's our legislation that we're working on right now. And I don't know exactly how it's going to look, but it's going, Michael, we're going to provide you a year reprieve. It's either going to be backdated to the beginning of this year, and everybody will get a refund, or it's going to be March of this year and go through March of next year to kind of encompass and give refunds for those who might have paid in that period. So no matter what, our goal is to give you 1 year without paying your fees, especially if you already paid it. And if you paid it before this began, and then if you paid it during this because you were told you had to pay it, and then you tried to order your wine through Loop and they said you couldn't order your wine because you didn't renew your license, or you tried to extend your premise and they said you couldn't do that because you couldn't renew your license, while at the whole entire time they said you didn't have to renew your license. All of that will be refunded to you in terms of our legislation. It's great, isn't it? Oh, okay, let's see, where am I? All right, a majority of hotels are not in a position to begin to bring their employees back to work in 2020. That additional $600 had been able to keep our employees whole, especially when they're paying insurance through COBRA. It is not because the employees are lazy and don't want to work. There simply isn't work to be had, especially in our industry. Additionally, the few employees who do refuse to return to work because they're making more on unemployment will lose their benefits when their employers turn them into unemployment. Do our lawmakers truly understand this? I think so, and I think that's actually why just today, there was an announcement that the $600 will be extended, because we're seeing across the country the increase in cases. We're seeing shutdowns happen all over again and people going back on unemployment through no fault of their own. So I think that is why we're seeing what was supposed to be an elimination of the $600 and maybe an extra $100 to $200, a potential short-term extension of the $600, recognizing that. So I think, me trying to think that they're being logical, and I know Congress sometimes isn't, but in this scenario, I think there is recognition of that, which is why there will potentially be an extension of the $600, not to the end of the year, but sometime a short-term extension and then phasing down into the $100 to $200. Okay, let's see. We are allowed to serve alcohol to golfers on our course without food. We have a snack shop halfway through the course. It contains no seating. It's just a shack in the middle of the course. Can we serve alcohol from there without food as long as they go directly out to golf? Oh, where's my cheat sheets? Hold on. I'm gonna go to the LCB one. Not that anything's better than anything else right now. Licensees that are located at golf courses that you can provide service to individuals playing golf. While that remains true, the additional guidance on the targeted mitigation efforts notes that golf courses may not allow golfers to consume those alcoholic beverages in locations where people may congregate, such as picnic tables or patios, unless that specific sale of alcohol is part of a larger transaction that includes a meal purchase. So, Marge, if you have a golf course, they are allowed, you do have the ability, if they take their drink and go out directly out to golf. They can't take their drink and sit at a picnic table and consume their drink or compare their scores with their friends. In that scenario, they need to get food, but you are allowed to serve alcohol as long as they take it out on the course. I knew I was going to get a golf question today. I felt it. Is there an update on the state sales tax prepayment? There's a few. I love bureaucracy. Few updates. The prepayment, if you are I forget what it's called, but it's a tier 1. So if you're between $25,000 and $100,000 that you were remitting, you can base your prepay off of the previous month, not off of 2019. That was in our daily update a few, maybe last week. I think it was last week. Time is flying. So revenue did make that exception. If you're above that 100,000 mark, they would like you to remit based off of 2019, but if that's shenanigans, because there's no way that you brought in anything close to what you did in 2019, you can email the Department of Revenue and ask to base it off of the previous month, and they are improving that on a case-by-case basis. So that was in the update last week for all of you that got, and I know it's a lot of my hotels that kind of got caught in that prepayment game. I know they're doing the same thing for amusement parks. Amusement parks have also been allowed to base it off of previous month. But if you're above that 100,000 a month in sales tax remittance mark, you do need to get specific approval from the department to do that. For a small, less than 25 private indoor event, how does the food with meal rule apply? If there is a small wedding reception, can alcoholic beverages be served for an additional hour or two after dinner is over? Yes, and I specifically asked the LCB why they didn't include that in their advisory or their FAQ or whatever the heck they put out last week. But they said, oh, it's going to be in the advisory notice 27, and it wasn't there either. A private event where food and beverage is included, the meal requirement is not hard and fast in terms of enforcement. They have to have food. You can't have a standing reception of any sort. But you are allowed to serve alcohol after that. Okay. Thank you for posting the petition to your Facebook page twice. Thank you again for circulating it up in the Lehigh Valley. I think we need some more circulation up in Lehigh Valley, so thank you for that. There's a question, is there anyone from the Keystone area who is involved and would like to meet and discuss some of the issues happening in central PA? I don't know, Tracy, if you want to share your email so people can get back to you. But if you're looking to do some type of event other people have, it really happened word of mouth. Honestly, somebody put it on their Facebook page and I think it got shared like 10,000 times, and that's how those events were coming together. Yes, you can submit questions anytime. Okay, let's see. Is there any way I can put together a wedding ceremony? Would be less than 50 guests total, where the bride, groom, and officiant, only those three are doing the ceremony without a mask. Perhaps if they are distanced some feet from another guest, same questions apply for a first dance. So it's kind of funny because the Philadelphia Department of Health, which is kind of like the most strict, actually said that it would be okay if you had a wedding and the bride and groom weren't wearing masks. Obviously, they want people to wear masks. You are not going to get dinged if they're not wearing a mask. And I would say first dance, they're the only people on the dance floor, and this is because I'm a softie, so you have to give me some wiggle room here. It's 5 minutes in terms of the first dance. So I think, and John can be the grumpy one here and refute me, but I would say in those scenarios, if you're keeping them 6 feet away from the rest of the guests and it's not allowing them to not wear a mask for the entirety of the wedding, the reception, I think that would be permissible. And I think that you would get a pass if LCE decided to crash the wedding.
I agree with that.
How many wedding
Melissa,
venues will?
But I agree. On the 50 guests total, this would assume it's going to be outside, correct? Because they can't do that inside right now, right?
Correct. Yeah, sorry, I did assume that. So yes, it would be less than 50 guests. And it's also, keep in mind, this is inclusive of your staff. This is inclusive of your DJs or your bands or if somebody's running the photo booth. That 50 is inclusive of all, as I said, beating hearts that are part of the group on that property. Yes, good clarification, John. Thank you. How many wedding venues will close permanently? I mean, John shared some of that data earlier. It's the longer this continues, the worse it's going to be. And I don't know why there is that disconnect in the governor's mind of he thinks that we're going to survive. I don't know why, but I don't know. I can't even make excuses anymore. Let's see. You can't keep complying. You either comply and die a slow death, or you don't comply and you get shut down by the liquor board. Yes, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. New law says the governor needs to be more transparent about COVID-19 data and things related to COVID-19. You have a right to know now. You can request information, and it's the law. They need to provide it. Does the PRLA plan to request any data since this new law was passed last week? We don't need to, because every media source in the entire state is requesting it. And this is not a straightforward process. It's faster than the court system, but it's related to the right to know law. So essentially what happens is you make a right to know request the release of data. The right to know office typically will approve that request because you have the right to know. And then if the governor doesn't like it, they can appeal. And then there's an appeal process. But I think that this law is going to require more transparency. I think that's why the governor wasn't thrilled with it. And hopefully, I don't think that information is going to come out this week, and it might not be next week, but that information is going to have to start coming out. And primarily, this law was passed because the right to know office is under the purview of the governor. And since he shut down all of his offices, there was nobody in the right to know office. So they probably would have approved it, but they weren't allowed to because they weren't working. So essentially, it says the right to know office is allowed to continue working, and they need to continue approving and processing these requests. Can you please confirm no bar service includes service bars inside for normal restaurant operations, but also for private events? Additionally, for our smaller private events where food is included, but operating with a cash bar, how are we to handle those transactions? No bar service inside whatsoever. Public restaurant, private event, there can be no bar service whatsoever inside. For a smaller private event, and like I said, I'll call the LCB again today. They have said that smaller private events are different than serving the public in terms of the tight food and meal provision. For a smaller private event, if it's a 4-hour wedding, they're doing cash drinks, but you are providing them food. Again, they can't go up to the bar. You need to be providing table service. But my understanding from the governor's office when they were still talking to me and the LCB is that events are being treated differently, because I asked that specific question. Again, I'm waiting for them to clarify that in the guidance, but they are delineating as long as there's food and it's a private event that it's permitted. But inside, 25 people or less, including staff, and there can be no service at the bar. Outside private event, there can be service at the bar. I don't make the rules. Okay, let's see. Is there any restriction or guideline against a cake display? I would assume there is not, considering there's no restriction against a buffet, but we're very closely complying with the rules. You can display the cake. You can have your cookie table. Don't ask me the cookie table question. I'm getting ahead of you on this one. But you need to be careful in terms of all of this. You need to, I mean, if you can keep people away from the cake so they don't get too close, it might be something to consider. And then, of course, with your buffets and things like that, you want to be careful on that front as well. But there is no restriction in terms of cake displays, cookie tables, anything like that. Customers being served must be seated at tables, so no standing hors d'oeuvres at small private events. Or does this apply to alcohol only or restaurant dining room only, Allegheny County? Actually, Michelle, that's universal across the state. No, if they are eating a cheese puff and or drinking a beverage, they need to be at their seat. So at all times, if there's food or beverage service, your guests, when they're consuming that food and beverage, need to be seated. So your standing cocktail hours are going to have to become seated table service cocktail hours if it's inside, or seated cocktail hours outside of less than 50 people. Ben is reminding you to wear your masks. With outdoor private tented events, as we move to cooler months, what are the regulations on sidewalls to allow for heating? Currently not allowed. You have to have 3 sides that are open for it to be considered outside. We can't get an answer from the governor's office a week in advance, let alone 2 to 3 months when cooler weather is going to come out. But I can tell you this, the pressure we're putting on right now, and the reason I keep on banging the drum and asking you guys to do outreach is because if we do not move the needle here, we are done when it gets colder outside, which is why we really need to get the legislative support and get the changes that we need here so that when we are in the cooler months, you can use those tents, or we can revive indoor seating and get back to some type of normalcy. So currently not permitted, but our efforts right now are going to determine the answer to that when we're actually in this scenario where we need to address it. July has been awful. Yeah, July is a big wedding month, and I can't explain it. Hopefully they give some flexibility on the 50% revenue drop. We had a record spring summer season booked 20 to 30% over numbers of last year. I think that we will get some clarification on that front. Can you explain the 300 employee limit again, as well as who the exception applies to? Are restaurants permitted to apply the employee limit per location? yes, that exception still applied in terms of the P3. They retained the carve-out they had previously secured for their industry, allowing the employee size threshold to be considered on a per location basis versus aggregated. As a result, restaurants would be eligible if they meet other requirements and have 300 or fewer employees per location. That is the law, the proposed legislation as of 12/10 on July 29th. And yes, Kate, I will put that list together for Allegheny and Butler counties. I'm going to write that down because usually when I'm done these webinars, I have a brain freeze. So Allegheny County and Butler. I'm having a lot, it's kind of silly, but putting together these contact lists is kind of like a brainless activity. So it's making me really happy right now. Let's see. Thank you, Emily, for the thank you. Any advice as to how to handle someone coming into a restaurant who is not wearing a mask, and after we approach the customer offering them a mask, their reply is that they have a medical condition? It would be extremely helpful if these people would have to carry a card from their medical professional verifying that they don't have to wear a mask due to a medical condition. Our staff have pointed out some people who have come into a restaurant claiming to have a medical condition, and for this reason, they do not have to wear a mask. And when this person makes it clear on social media that they're against wearing masks and do not have a no medical condition, very frustrating. A webinar on training enforcement would be hugely helpful and made available to us to be able to forward to our employees. Yes, yes, and yes. I'll now give you another yes. It is very frustrating and something that I'm toying with, and I don't know if it's going to make a difference, but there is some chat of having, if somebody says they have a medical condition, signing a card stating that they have a medical condition and they cannot wear a mask. Or you have the right, and this is the problem that you have the right to say, I'm sorry, you need to go somewhere else because we have a very strict mask requirement, and I'm sorry that we can't allow you into this business. That usually causes problems. So I know the de-escalation on the mask front, that training is going to be really important. Like I said, I know Hope found some resources. I'm sure we'll have it in the update today, but it's up to you. You have to determine the risk. Do you want somebody, whether they have a medical condition or not, coming into your restaurant or your business without a mask? And do you think that's safe for your employees and your other guests? And that's really what you have to keep in the back of your mind. We were with one of the other testifiers from yesterday. I mean, he's been so firm in this, and he just said, if you said you went down the street and you didn't have to wear a mask, go back to that restaurant you went to down the street where you didn't have to wear a mask because you have to wear one here. Your job is to check all of the boxes in terms of compliance, but in terms, you're not going to get in trouble for it, but you also have to think about the risk you might be putting your employees or your other guests in place if you do allow them to come in without the mask. I have now had 2 potential clients for a banquet tell me they were going to cancel because they're just going to have it at their church. Our church is exempt from the 25-person rule. I didn't think so, but why do other people? This is the cut down the middle headache that we seem to be having. There is a religious exemption to the mitigation efforts, and religious exemption is for religious ceremonies. It is for church, any of that. It does not apply to the reception following the wedding. So the church might be able to have 200 people. That would be dumb. But 200 people in a small church for a wedding, but then the church can't host the reception and have 200 people eating and drinking. That is going to be an enforcement issue. But I do think some people are reading the religious exemption and thinking that it's a universal application, and it's not. It's an application for a religious ceremony, not for the partying and reception that occurs afterwards. Okay. Adam, I think I've tried to answer your questions 3 ways to Sunday, and I don't think I'm going to be able to give you a better answer than I've already done, but I'll try again. Why am I able to hold an event outside in a tent with all the flaps closed, which is smaller than our actual ballroom, as I was told by my local health department, with more than 50 people, and not be able to hold an event inside? You shouldn't have all the flaps closed. That's not permitted. Not be able to hold an event inside, which is a larger space than the tent with the flaps closed. A tent with all the flaps closed is pretty much the same as indoor, isn't it? Also for everyone, yeah, I get it now.
Hey, Melissa, there was a one
Yep.
Q&A which may have been superseded since then, but it came out on the 15th. And they said, this came out of the governor's office, the health department said, health department Q&A. It said attendance allowed for outdoor dining or events. However, the Commonwealth encourages tents not to be fully enclosed, which would limit air circulation and undo the benefits of being outdoors. That's what you've said, but I guess to Adam's point, if you read that literally, they're just encouraging it not to be enclosed. So maybe there's been other guidance that came out since this FAQ was put together. But this was the targeted mitigation FAQ. I just happened to think about it when this came up earlier.
Again,
So,
I can't explain the
Right.
logic for the governor or
Right.
secretary of health.
Yeah, it's very gray.
If a cafe also serves draft beer, can a guest order a beer and a sandwich at the counter, or do they need to be seated to order? They need to be seated. If they're eating it on premise, if they're eating it on your licensed premise, they need to be seated. If they're getting beer in a sealed container to go with their sandwich, they can go up to the bar, get their to-go order, and then leave the premises. We have a brewery. We typically have food trucks, no on-premise kitchen, but offer third-party food. Our license to serve is only our tap room. Therefore, is the to-go considered outside? If they sit at a table in our unlicensed area, is food then not required? Any clarity on that topic? The food truck question. I'll try and tackle this from a few ways. And yes, if they come into your tap room, they get their beer and they go, we had a winery around here that did it, and they go to where your license isn't. They go out to the field that's next to your brewery, or they go out to the parking lot where you have tables set up that's not part of your licensed establishment. In that scenario, it's considered to go. But also, as we've said before, if they're on public property, they have an open container. So you have that box you need to check. Second, if you want them to be able to consume on premise, the food trucks are permitted. They just have to prove that they've gotten food, and that can be via a receipt or even the food truck giving them a ticket that they can show you in the tap room saying they got nachos to prove that they checked the meal requirement. But yes, if they technically, if they're taking it off of your licensed premise, it's no longer under your jurisdiction, that would be permitted. Event or wake and rental hall in Allegheny County with BYOB, do orders apply to them? Meal with alcohol seated, no more than 25 indoor. The 25 indoor applies 100% for any event in Allegheny County. It's not going to be LCE that enforces it. Well, if the hall is licensed, that could be enforceable. So if it's in a rental hall, the orders would apply. Now, if it's somebody's private home, your 25 limit is what applies. So it depends really on what that rental hall, if it's licensed anywhere within the state of Pennsylvania, all of the orders do apply. If it's a private home, it's your 25 person number that would apply in that scenario. Okay. With outdoor dining, I probably won't meet the 50% loss of revenue. However, once outdoor dining is no longer an option in the colder months, how can we get the relief we need then when I'll for sure be over 50%? I will tell you this, the National Restaurant Association is trying to lower that 50% number, and they have said at 20%, you're probably going out of business. So they think 20% should be the metric that's used. So we might see that changed. Also, Brad, depending on how long this new P3 goes for, it might be a measure that you can use later in the year. But like I said, this is still very much a moving target, and there is a lot of proactiveness in terms of lowering that 50% number, because I know a lot of you to survive did an awesome job in terms of expanding outdoors, and that could hurt you in terms of the P3. So there's still going to movement on that front. Is there any guidance on best practice of using a microphone? Do we need to, for example, wrap the mic in plastic wrap or something? There is no specific guidance on microphones. I don't hate the idea. Like, I would encourage you to sanitize it between people using it. I've actually spoken in a few mics, and I kind of wanted to sanitize it in between using it, but there is no specific guidance in terms of microphones. Okay. I am not answering questions that are not actual questions. Thank you, Philip, for the PRLA staff is awesome. Michael Leifer, every week, Michael writes an awesome message. Michael Leifer says, thank you so much, John, Hope, Ben, Mick, and the rest of the amazing PRLA. You are all wonderful. It would be helpful for the non-mask requirements. It would be helpful if there's an official card as provided by the governor to be able to get their name, address, et cetera, and have them sign it that we hold in-house or submit. I can tell you right now, you're not going to get anything from the governor's office, but we can probably look into something that we can put together. I want to cross-check it and make sure you can. My understanding is that you can, but that really, the whole signing a document, I literally just came up in my brain today. So Denise, let us look into that. The governor's office and even Philadelphia has said they're not going to be enforcing the mask requirement on individuals. So it's really on you to come up with us to come up with creative ways to kind of make them feel bad about the fact that they're going to sign a card saying they have a medical condition when clearly they don't. I think John did go over the tent sidewall question again. Thank you, Brad, for the thank you. If it's for the rental hall wake event question, does a meal requirement apply if it is a BYOB? Yes, if it is any type of restaurant or any type of venue that is licensed and serving the public, the meal requirement is triggered. It's not just a licensed establishment, LCE, liquor licensed establishment. It's any establishment that is licensed to operate within Allegheny County, within the state of Pennsylvania. So anyone that is serving the public or doing a private event that is licensed to do so, the meal requirement is triggered in terms of alcohol service. Thank you for the thank you. Sue also writes us a nice note every week. Thank you, Sue. And I think we have gotten, thanks, I love you too, Cynthia. I think we have gotten to the end of this. And yes, Dominic, I will let me just get my life in order and I will hit the road out to Delaware County. And hopefully my brain will be back to normal operations when I get there. So Dominic, I will see you in a little bit. And we'll do this again next week, everyone. See you then.